in colonial America now, religious diversity. It's funny because diversity in colonial America will be regional. That may be an important thing to write down. You won't see diversity inside of Massachusetts Bay. But when you look at the American colonies, you will see some religious diversity. Okay? And you've heard these things before. This is not anything new to you guys. Okay? So in America, you know that New England is incredibly intolerant. Okay? You know that England is intolerant. That's why people are leaving. So the first guy we'll talk about is William Penn. Okay? And he will found the colony of Pennsylvania for his group called the Society of Friends, which are the Quakers. Pennsylvania will be founded as a refuge for Quakers. If you're a Quaker living in England, chances are you're going to get arrested and go to jail. You're going to be persecuted no matter what happens. As soon as America was settled, first in the South and then in New England, as soon as it was settled, okay, people saw America as a haven. As a haven. If you have problems in England, you can always go to America. The journey's going to be tough and life ain't going to be easy, but you have somewhere to go. It's like an overflow valve. So to keep from getting persecuted in England, the Quakers will come to America. Okay, they'll found Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania will be a haven for them. Okay? The next one we're going to talk about are the Catholics. Okay? Cecil Calvert, and there were two Calvert brothers. I'm going to go into both of them. Okay? He became known as Lord Baltimore. He is going to sit here and cut a deal to form the colony of Maryland for Catholics. So when we talk about regional, you have the entire colony of Pennsylvania reserved for Quakers. You have the entire colony of Maryland reserved for Catholics. So if you're in England, and think about how cool this is. If you're in England and you want religious freedom, you go to America. That's kind of cool, because that's the way we portray ourselves. One thing to remember about Maryland, guys, it doesn't matter what colony you're in, the pyramid never goes away. So when you have the upper class in Maryland, okay, the Cavalier, and remember, Maryland's one of the Chesapeake colonies, they're going to grow tobacco. Okay, so you're going to have the plantation system. The plantation owners were Catholic, but their workforce was Protestant. And because you have a problem between the two, they've been fighting wars for centuries in Europe over that, Maryland had to pass an act of toleration. This is the first law that demands toleration, but it's limited. It's the first time a colony will pass a law saying you have to be tolerant of another religion. And the reason was not because they felt sorry for people's souls. The reason is they needed somebody to pick the tobacco in the field. So they had to appease all these Protestant indentured servants. This act says, and this is just in case you need, the reason it is limited is it says you can be any religion in Maryland, and you're talking Catholic versus Protestant, as long as you believe in Christ. In other words, you can be any Christian religion in Maryland. If you're Jewish, you're out of luck. If you're Muslim, you're out of luck. So it will tolerate any Christian religion. But that's as far as they're going to go with that. And this right here is pretty much why. This is why you have to pass a Maryland Act of Toleration. Because you have the pyramid, and the pyramid doesn't get along with itself. Eventually, this revolt will break into a war even with the Maryland Act of Toleration, and the Protestants will overthrow the Catholics. So this is only going to last about 50 years, the Maryland experience. One thing to keep in mind about this, and this is kind of cool, okay? You guys took world history, right? Okay, if I take Euro, okay. If you did, one thing you know for sure, that Protestants and Catholics cannot get along in Europe. They've never had. Ever since Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses on the door, they've been fighting and fighting and fighting, and I'm talking about horrible, bloody wars and things like that. When you bring that to America, you bring the war with it. Okay? So that problem that's the reason why Calvin came in the first place, was to get out of Protestant England. So the problem between Protestant and Catholic will follow into America. We didn't talk about this very much. And the reason I'm going to mention it is God, it's weird. If there's any purely American religion, it's that. It's deism. Americans became Protestants because they came from England. They came Catholic because they moved into Maryland, things like that. But when it comes to a pure religion that Americans developed themselves, it's deism. Okay? It rose out of Enlightenment. If you write anything about politics, or any type of essay on politics or government, mention the Enlightenment. Okay? The Enlightenment, for all practical purposes, was an attack on established thought processes. In other words, in Europe, the reason it was called the Dark Ages is because there's no intellect. There's no education going on. The church controlled everything. If the Pope said that's the way it is, that's the way it is. But when thinkers start asking questions, guys, that's the secret of the Enlightenment, is when you start asking questions. Why is the grass green? Okay? Why does the sun rise over here and set over here? Is the sun moving or are we moving? When you ask those questions, you're trying to enlighten yourself. Okay? And that's what that is. It was a huge explosion of intellect. Okay? Some people like the idea that you could explain the natural world with logic and reason and not simply by asking a priest. Okay? Now, there were religious groups that didn't like this. It's one reason why the Inquisition was formed. Okay? Galileo had problems with it. Okay? But still, that's where it rose from. Okay? These are the Americans that were pretty much the founders of America. Jefferson and Franklin. If you know about these men, especially Franklin, you know that they were inventors. They invented things. And that came out of their desire to explain their natural world. If you ever go to Monticello, look at Thomas Jefferson's copying machine. Okay? He's got a desk sitting right there who would write letters. But he has a series of arms and things that connect the pencil he's writing with to a pencil on another desk that will write exactly the same thing. It's pretty cool. That way he could write a letter and keep a copy of it. You know? He invented the chair you guys are sitting in. If your chair has wheels on it, Jefferson invented that. He's the first one to put wheels on a chair. He's the first one to put swivels in the chair. Man had a lot of time on his hands on top of that mountain in Virginia. Okay? But these guys believed in reason and logic, and they believed that reason, logic, and science could explain their world. They were not atheists, and they were not agnostic, okay? They believed in God, but what they believed in this, God gave man the ability to figure it out, okay? God's the author of the AP exam, okay? He said, okay, guys, here's your green grass, you figure it out. And because people could sit there and discover chloroform and things like that, that's what Jefferson believed. God gave us the ability to figure out his world. That's deism. Okay? Everybody get so far? Okay. Hang on, guys. All right? We're getting into the 1800s now. Okay? Remember that some of these questions are based on time period. So if you get a question about colonial society, okay, a lot of that stuff we just talked about can help you. Anytime you're talking about the stuff, anytime you're talking about social, religion's always social. First thing, going straight to the second one. It is just as revolutionary as the first. It is another social revolution, just in a different way. And I can see that one too. Okay? List two similarities between the first and second Great Awakening. There's two differences between the first and second Great Awakening. Okay? The similarities would be, first of all, they were religious based. They are both non-violent revolutions, social revolutions, based on people's religious beliefs. That's what they have in common. Is that thunder?
No.
Okay, good. Enough of that. We can't have another test postponement. Any of you guys taking, no, that's right, they're all juniors. Some seniors are taking, their EOCs or messing with their AP exams. I had one come to me today, because I have a couple of seniors. And the counselor said, just go to your teacher and work it out. You know, because the AP exam they're going to take next week is going to interfere with their senior final. That's power. Because they don't take that power. If they don't take that final, they don't get their diplomas. I see some brand new cigars in my future. I would not do that. I would never blackmail a kid that you know about. All right. Anyway, Second Great Awakening. Guys, this is important. This is the Great Awakening that was brought upon by that great migration over the Appalachian Mountains. In other words, you can make the case in the Second Great Awakening that it's Jackson's Great Awakening. This is when you're talking about Jacksonian America, all those yeomen moving over those mountains and developing that market economy out there with the canals and the turnpikes and stuff. When all those yeomen move over those mountains and start farming that land, they take their culture with them. That's important. So this is going to be just as much part of the yeoman revolution as Jackson's election was. This is when yeomen are going to start finding their own culture. And a major part of culture is religion. Okay? It will be Protestant. It will be Protestant. Okay? So the Second Great Awakening is when you have this entirely huge mass movement into the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee River Valley. You have half a nation out there. And they start to develop their culture through religion. You have the camp meetings and the circuit riders and the burned over district in New York, all this evangelism and things like this. Okay? This is one part of it. When you get over there, you start to see women take charge of reform movements. When these people get over there, they get away from the East Coast, they get away from the cities, and they're forming their own society and culture and things like this, they start to attack the ills of their society. Alcoholism, in some cases slavery, all right? The welfare of the mentally insane and people in prisons. So reform movements will arise from the Second Great Awakening. You did not see that in the First Great Awakening. One reason is this. The First Great Awakening was a Puritan thing. This is about half the country. This is an entire demographic movement. And because it is so many people, they are going to have a plurality. They're not going to all be the same denomination. The dominant denomination will be Baptist, but you'll also see Methodist. Okay? So what happens is you have this great movement. They start to form their own culture and their own religion on their terms. It is antinomian. That's a big deal. It is 100% antinomian. No one's saying you got to worship a certain way. These new denominations, Baptist, Methodist, do not have a hierarchy like a pope or a bishop or things like that. Okay? Okay. This is a biggie. Guys, women's history is always big. It's always big, okay? The answer to this question is simply put, Republican mother. Always remember who the Republican mother is. Some women were not satisfied being the Republican mother. Abigail Adams wasn't, okay? And they want something else to do. They want to contribute to their society, but they are hemmed in by this Republican mother thing, okay? When you have the Second Great Awakening, which is religious, this rolls into the religious aspects. We want to make a more pure society. And the person who is the guardian of morality in the home, according to the Republican mother, is the mother. Okay? That's why they were able to embrace this. Remember this. Women will always drive reform in the United States. Always. And that goes back to the Republican mother ethos. They are the guardians of morality in the home. So part of a woman's job is to drive reform movements. Just in case you see a document by this guy, okay, he was an evangelist in upstate New York, and his evangelism was supposed to be so effective that people caught on fire with their love for God. And because you had this entire district in western New York that supposedly was burned down from the Holy Spirit, it was called the burned over district. So if you see, that's what it's talking about. It's not literally a fire. It's people whose souls are on fire for God. They were very, very strict, almost Orthodox Protestants. Okay, we've got just a couple more things, okay? And these things are tied, that's why I'm going to keep on going for just a second, okay? These people right here were Orthodox. One thing was this, okay? If you lived up here and you were disgusted with society, you're starting to see cities like Rochester, people like that grow and everything, Buffalo. And you say, this is disgusting. I see what happens in those cities. I see the prostitution. I see the filth. I want no part of that disgusting society. I want to form my own. Okay? This is what comes out of the burned over district. You start to have the utopian communities. Brook Farm, those wonderful people in Oneida that never met a family member they didn't like. And New Harmony. Also the Shakers, the people that just, I can't even comment on them, it's too weird. Those ones had the funny dance. But the desire to create a utopia came out of the burned over district. Guys, one last thing before we go. Concept here, okay? In the American mind, because we have freedom of thought, because we have the liberty of freedom we want to, okay? There is something in every American that desperately seeks utopia. Every American wants it. Okay? Every American has their own perception of what utopia is. Maybe utopia is going home and sitting on the couch, drinking a beer, smoking a cigar, watching Sports Center. I don't do that. But anyway, maybe that's what it is, okay? Whatever your utopia is, Americans have the freedom to pursue it, okay? And that's what's important about this. We have seen many attempts over the years to create utopia. The Soviet Union pushed communism as being a form of utopia. Cuba, North Korea, the same thing. John Winthrop produced The City on the Hill as his version of utopia. So utopia is something inherent in the human spirit. In America, it's more pronounced. And the reason is we have the freedom to pursue it. The communes in the 1960s were utopian. Okay? So that's something very basic. It's a relic of the Second Great Awakening. Okay? This is next, okay? But we'll put them down here as the last one because they were a utopian movement, okay? They were seeking to worship God the way they wanted to. And everywhere they went, because their belief system was so different than everybody else's, they were persecuted, okay? So they finally did the smartest of all of them. They said the further away we get from persecution, the better off we are. So they finally moved to a place they called Deseret, which we call Utah, okay? The most successful of the utopian communities are the Mormons. And that's it.